What is up, 49ers faithful? We are back with another episode of the 49ers Webzone No Huddle podcast on the Odyssey Network. And we have got a special treat for you today. We've got a guest host with me today. Al and Brian are on vacation, so we got a guest host, Rohan Chakravarthi, man, from 49ers Webzone. Bro, like it's awesome to have you on. You and I have been talking for a while about this, and it's finally great to get you on here, man. Thanks so much for jumping on with me today.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me on. Obviously, No Huddle, the staple of the 49ers web zone platform. So glad to be on, glad to be a guest, and glad to share the platform with you today.
Awesome, man. And before we start here, can you kind of give us a little bit of background on like how you got into this and like the web zone and stuff? We know this, Al, Brian, and I know this already, but for our listeners who may not know this, you kind of just give a rundown of like how you got into it and like what you're doing now with the Badgers and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, no. So I started as a writer for 49ers Web Zone in 2021, just after the season ended, when the 49ers were looking to select Trey Lance. That's when I started, grew a little bit over the summer. Obviously, attended training camp this past year, done a lot of things, attended some 49ers events covering the 49ers for the Web Zone. So that's what I do. That's kind of my main job, journalist there. But overall, cover the 49ers, host my own podcast with Marco Martinez, the 49ers Red Zone podcast. So for those of you guys that don't know, just search up my name on YouTube. You'll find it there. And the other thing, I attend school in Wisconsin, so I cover the Wisconsin Badgers as well. Currently am the site manager at Wisconsin's SB Nation site, Bucky's Fifth Quarter.
That's awesome. I see you posting stuff about the Badgers like every weekend. It's nice because we get the full sort of spectrum from you, right? On Saturdays we get like the Badgers
Yeah.
stuff, and then on Sundays we get the Niners stuff. So if y'all haven't followed Rohan already, you guys definitely need to do that. It's a great follow. You break down film as well, which we have talked about too in the past, and I think that we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think that you've been doing a lot of great stuff for the Web Zone and for the Badgers as well. So happy to see your success, man. I mean, like, from seeing you jump on the scene last year to now and doing the stuff that you've done to branch out, it's been super awesome to see. So really happy for where you're going and really excited for what's to come. So
really appreciate it, man. Yeah, obviously you've been in this on the platform, one of the first podcasts out there. So appreciate the kind words from you.
Absolutely, man. So as we shift kind of from our love fest here to the love fest for the 49ers, man, and 8 straight wins. We didn't get a chance to break down the Commanders win due to the Christmas holiday. Hope everybody had a safe and fun and happy Christmas holiday. But the 49ers racked up another win and an impressive win against the best defense that they arguably have faced to date with that Washington Commanders defense, and specifically that defensive line. And Brock Purdy passed another test. It's another notch in his belt. And for those of you who are watching on the stream, I'm wearing the Brock Purdy T-shirt, coined by the captain of the Brock Purdy hype train himself, Brian Rennick, who is selling these, by the way. So contact Brian Rennick if you want one of these. But it's another kind of test that Brock Purdy has passed. And when you have a rookie quarterback, and especially a guy who's like Brock Purdy at the end of the draft, you have these incremental sort of like challenges that you wanted to pass. And this was another one, right? And we're not expecting him to be a superstar. We're just hoping that he is able to get through these small little tests. And how do you think he did against that Washington defense? Like, what was your overall impression of him?
Yeah, I mean, Brock Purdy obviously has flashed in his few games. That's why there's a hype around him. That's why you've got that T-shirt on you right now. It's because there's been that hype train about Brock Purdy, and I think this is, like you said, another test that he passed. Now, every time Brock Purdy's entered the field, it's not just been ups, right? There has been ups and downs. You have to recognize both sides, but you also have to understand that he's a rookie quarterback. This is his first NFL playing action, and understand the importance of what he's been able to do. Once again, Brock Purdy had a pretty solid performance, 15 to 22 passing, 234 yards through the 2 touchdowns. The biggest thing, I guess the 2 biggest things. Number one, the 49ers offense is set up so that Kyle Shanahan can scheme open receivers and quarterbacks. The reason that other NFL analysts say that this is one of the easier quarterback jobs is because your job is to hit open receivers. Have the aggressiveness, let it rip. And that's something Purdy hasn't been afraid to do. He's let it rip. The one that you saw to George Kittle that Ray McLeod could have caught, there's been times where you question whether 49ers quarterbacks would have that the chance or really the willingness to throw that football. That's the difference when you have Brock Purdy. He's a guy who lets it rip. Perhaps it's the rookie mentality in him. Perhaps it's the lack of NFL experience. But so far, it's benefiting the 49ers. Now, his turnover worthy plays are pretty high at this moment. He is a guy who has gotten lucky with some dropped interceptions, but when you see the aggressiveness at the moment, when you look at pure statistics, it seems like it's benefiting the 49ers. In the second part, you've got to talk about the athleticism, especially against strong defensive lines like the Washington Commanders. You're going to need to be able to evade the pocket. He doesn't have supreme athleticism. He's not a running quarterback or a guy who can necessarily punish teams with his legs, but he's got just enough to create off-schedule plays, and that's another value that the 49ers offense hasn't necessarily had since Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL in 2018.
Yeah, I think one of the most impressive plays from Brock Purdy in that game was actually an incompletion, and I think that the one that you'll probably think about as well is it was a play where they had a free rusher off the edge. It was a blitz, and there was I think it was a corner blitz, a slot corner, I believe, came, and he had Purdy dead to rights, and he spun out of it a couple times and kind of maneuvered towards the sideline and threw it away, and it was just like you just don't see that out of 49ers quarterbacks, right? At least under Kyle Shanahan, you just haven't seen that, and I think that was really what was missing. And one of the things that I look at with the interception worthy plays that you kind of brought up, and in my opinion, I think that it is an important stat, but it's in a way it's kind of misleading because it's a function of Kyle Shanahan's offense. Because of the way that it's designed, there's always, like, you're going to be throwing into traffic, right? You're going to be throwing into tight windows. And I think that's where Jimmy had thrived, where he was able to throw it into those tight windows. But that's also one of the drawbacks too, is that you have to have a guy that's willing to let it rip into those tight windows, and Jimmy wasn't able to do that the entire time. Like he would hold back,
right?
He would throw it behind receivers. He would throw it to the defenders. Like it just like I feel like, and I think that I'm not alone in saying this, and this is not a slight towards Jimmy or anything like that, but I feel like this offense, at least for this year, has not looked as good as it has as it has under Brock Purdy. Like it didn't look like this when Jimmy was playing. It looked disconnected. They often had times moving the ball. It looked disjointed, especially after McCaffrey came. And we were just wondering, like, when is this offense going to wake up? And I feel like injecting a new sort of, I guess, ignorant or inexperienced quarterback into the fray, like that has kind of helped them, because he doesn't know enough to have bad habits. He doesn't know enough he's never played in Seattle, for example, right? Like we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like he doesn't know what it's like to fail up there because he's never played up there, right? Mm-hmm. So he's just a young guy that's just going in for the first time, seeing the stuff for the first time, and ignorance is bliss, right? So a lot of what we're seeing here, both the good and the bad, like the turnover worthy plays and also all the splash plays that he's making, it's a result of just kind of letting it go, letting him play. And I feel like this is the first time Kyle's had this much confidence in the quarterback since he's been here. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
I would say that it's similar. I think so. I'll say yes, but I'll also give a little bit of pushback. I think the way I identify confidence is the way that Kyle Shanahan play calls on regular downs. And I don't know if the play calling has necessarily changed as much. The difference to me has been Purdy has been hitting the throws that Shanahan wants. And a lot of people might say that that's a power dynamic with Shanahan. Maybe he shouldn't just want one throw. But to me, the reason he wants that throw is because on film, that throw is repeatedly open if you throw it and let it rip. And Purdy is willing to do that. And maybe that has opened up a little more for Brock Purdy, which is where I think the confidence has increased. And maybe it also increases the aggressiveness that you might see on from fourth downs. We've seen Kyle Shanahan now go for it on a couple of fourth downs. Obviously, he still has some conservativeness, but he's gone for it on a couple of fourth downs, albeit that's where I'll criticize him the most, because I think his play calling has been worst on fourth downs. But you can see an increased level of confidence. I just think that it still stems from the same play calling that he had with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just you might be seeing different results on a certain level of plays, especially on deeper passes.
Right, because as we know, Kyle kind of calls pass plays in like levels. There's a short, medium, and a deep. And Jimmy would most likely, most of the time, focus on the short or medium. And right, we see Brock Purdy now focusing on that third level that we usually haven't seen before. And again, like it's kind of interesting because Jimmy was having his best year yet as a pro until he got hurt. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those habits that he had in the past, they were kind of breaking. He was throwing the ball away, but and he was hitting checkdowns and things like that when things weren't open. But I think that now you add that mobility, like we said, that Purdy has, to be able to get out of the pocket. Like the second touchdown to Kittle where it was just like it was a naked bootleg across against the grain, and he was able to hit Kittle along the sideline for a first down and basically get it into his hands, and Kittle did the rest. Like, you just didn't see that before. And I think that
Right.
there's those little small nuances that may be different with the play calling, but like you're saying, like the bones are there, right? It's the same playbook that they're running. You can't install a new playbook at this point of the season for a quarterback who hasn't had any first team reps, right? It's just not
Correct.
possible.
Yeah.
So they're running with the same playbook. It's just a matter of him being able to hit those different looks. So I'm in total agreement with that, and I think that that's a very fair and valid point.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you got to give credit to Purdy, right? The thing that I've said about Brock Purdy, look, those looks that he's been getting open receivers. That's not, but I can't slight Purdy for him being able to throw to open receivers. I don't think that that's something that you can really say is his fault. And also in the past, we've seen how 49er fans have complained because quarterbacks can't hit open receivers. Purdy is currently doing that at a high level. I haven't seen many errant throws on open plays. And that's a testament to him understanding his incapabilities, but also a testament for his poise. That's a word that you'll hear a lot with Purdy, his poise. You talked about that free rusher play. That's straight up poised. You need to be able to understand you might be taking a huge hit, but you also got to understand your awareness, the situational awareness. That's something he's really good at with pocket presence, being able to evade that play and then even trying to make a play out of it after that. There's certain things about Purdy that you have to tip your cap to, even if you don't want to.
Yeah, and I feel like the obviously he had that interception that was not his fault. Juwan Jennings batted it
Yeah.
right to the defender, and that drives me crazy because the drop rate has been pretty high for the 49ers receivers. Although of late it's been much better during the win streak, but before that it was amongst the
Yeah,
high
it was
still,
high.
so it was not good. But that being said, like he's still putting the ball where it needs to be, and I think that when you have and I've said this for weeks now, when you have a hot team, a good defense, and a hot quarterback, it's really hard to beat come playoff time. So I'm hoping that they can kind of continue this. They initially, there was that long play to Ray, which was fantastic. I think that he played the Debo role perfectly on that on his long touchdown run. Aside from that, in the first half, they had the first drive where they kind of fizzled out on fourth down, but they were kind of struggling a little bit, and we hadn't seen that a lot from them, in the first half of this winning streak. And it was that Washington defensive line that was kind of winning the battle up front. The Niners were not able to run the ball well in the first half. They were not able to really get into a rhythm. Do you kind of see teams copying this blueprint of trying to shut down the run, stack the box, and make Brock Purdy beat them going into the playoffs?
I think so. And the reason that I think that this could be a potential reason for concern is in the playoffs, when you look at the teams the 49ers are going to face specifically later on, all the teams have really good defensive lines, top level defensive lines. The Eagles might have the best, if not for the 49ers. They might have the best or second best defensive line in the NFL, with especially after adding Robert Quinn. Cowboys have probably the runner-up right now for Defensive Player of the Year in Micah Parsons. They've also got some key rotational pieces. DeMarcus Lawrence is still there. Dorrance Armstrong has nearly 10 sacks on the year, I believe. They've got good pieces there. And Minnesota has a strong defensive line too. Zadarius Smith has had a resurgence there. You've got two strong defensive tackles and I believe Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson. You've still got pieces there in Danielle Hunter. It's three good defensive lines, and that's just the top three seeds. The other teams as well have good defensive lines. Now, the 49ers haven't necessarily faced very many strong defensive lines this year. When you look at it, the New Orleans Saints could be a team you consider, the Kansas City Chiefs earlier in the year, and then in the last few games, it was the Miami Dolphins who had a strong defensive line, and now this team here with a strong defensive line. In those games, apart from the Dolphins game, the 49ers haven't run the football that well. That's something that the 49ers haven't run the football that well, and sometimes that's left to offensive miscues. In this game, the 49ers scored 17 of their 37 points off of better, just good field position, because the defense got turnover on downs or something, and it ended up being good field position, be your defense or special teams. And so that's where I'm going to have a cause for concern potentially in the playoffs. When teams have strong defensive lines, because our offensive line has sometimes had an inability to move the line of scrimmage, how are the 49ers going to combat that offensively to score enough to keep with other teams? Their defense can hold them, but are they going to have enough offense? That's my main question, and that's something good that you brought up there.
Yeah, I think that they're starting to get into a rhythm with getting George Kittle involved as well. The first half of the season, he was just not getting the ball at all. And I think that you can even argue, even during the win streak, he's only had, I believe, counting here, he's only had 1, 2, 3 games where he's had over 80 yards receiving. So it's been he has 713 yards on the year, and he has the 8 touchdowns, but it's almost like it's kind of a footnote just because he hasn't had those monster games besides the last Washington one. It was his first 100-yard game of the season, and he had the 2 touchdowns. So I think that they may be starting to involve him more, and I think that once you see George Kittle get involved more, the offense will go with that as well, because he
Yeah.
brings so much as a receiver, especially with the ball in his hands after the catch. So it's going to be something interesting to watch, getting him involved. And I do have to ask you, like, seeing on film, what has the change been to get him more involved the last couple of weeks, specifically against Seattle and Washington?
Yeah, no. I mean, in a way, it's a wake up for Kyle Shanahan to get George Kittle involved because of the injury to Debo Samuel. When you talk about it, 2 weeks ago, I believe, in the Seattle game, yeah, 2 weeks ago, I thought the 49ers receivers arguably had their worst game of the year. I think the leading receiver in that game, apart from Kittle, was only 33 yards for Jawan Jennings. There were a couple
Mhm.
of drops. Receivers just weren't necessarily getting as open. And so, what does that mean? You've got to find a way to get the ball to your best player. The Seahawks defense, not necessarily the strongest. They had Quandre Diggs, obviously, at safety, but not necessarily the strongest over the middle of the field in terms of coverage. That was a benefit for George Kittle. And it was also just the attention that they put towards Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey has really helped unlock other players in this offense, like Brandon Ayuk, like George Kittle. Why? Because when you look at the certain plays, specifically the touchdown that George Kittle had against the Seahawks, what is the concept? They're running McCaffrey and Kittle to the same side. That forces the defense to either account for one player or both. And really, most teams will look for the first player that's getting open.
Mhm.
McCaffrey is normally that guy running out of the flat. Defenders barge up on him, leaving favorable matchups or open matchups for George Kittle. I think that the McCaffrey has really opened up this offense. We can talk about that in a little bit to him specifically, but as for the last 2 weeks, I think that that's been a huge reason why the 49ers have had more success because Christian McCaffrey, his presence has commanded a lot of defenders, and that has helped the offense. That's why, despite him having only 12 receiving yards in this past game, he still had a big impact. I believe in the Seattle game, he had only 30 receiving yards on 6 catches, but you understand that his impact is much more than what the stats indicate when you look at the film and see how much attention he attracts.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that it's more so as they kind of get down to the wire, it's more so being able to have that outlet if they choose to have it, because there were several plays where over the last 2 weeks where there were just little dump offs and McCaffrey either got a first down or got close to a first down. And they've really kind of taken advantage of that his ability to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. It's something that we've never seen for Kyle Shanahan, at least here with the 49ers. So it's added that different dimension. And you mentioned the receivers. So the emergence of Brandon Ayuk has been something that's been really, really nice to see this year. I think we all remember him being in the doghouse a couple of years ago, and in the 2020 season, and Kyle kind of getting on him, and Ayuk not really getting the ball. And ever since then, he's kind of turned into a different player. He's had a different mentality. He's an aggressive blocker in the running game now. He's regularly like flattening cornerbacks. He mixes it up with guys. He's on pace for 1,000 yards, so he's got just over 850 yards. So he's got 855 yards this season. So he would have his first career 1,000 yard season with 150 yards in the last 2 games, which I hope that he should be able to get, depending on what happens with the offense and the opponents and what Kyle wants to do with resting the team. So I think that with Debo being gone, you're seeing different guys step up and guys that we expected to step up, like Ayuk, like Kittle, like McCaffrey. And it's gonna be interesting to see how they reintegrate Debo as he gets back. As of the recording today, I believe he's practicing today, so he is well on his way to returning for the playoffs. But it'll be interesting to see how they distribute the ball. I mean, it's only one ball, right? And they have to be able to get that ball to all their players. It'll be a fun challenge. It'll be fun to see. But I think that now when they acquired McCaffrey, now we're seeing that like Kyle Shanahan offense where we all talked about like, oh man, it's going to be super hard to stop. Who's going to get the ball? Who's going to be the one that beats you? It's now finally coming into form. So that being said, they are 8-0 since Christian McCaffrey has ascended to the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Obviously, they had him for that Chiefs game as well, and McCaffrey was not starting in that game. But since he has become the starter, they're undefeated. And can you kind of take me through that and take me through like the impact that McCaffrey has had, not only by catching the ball, but again, you kind of touched on by just being on the field.
Yeah, no. There are several reasons. About 2 weeks ago, I put out an article that despite being here for only 6 weeks, Christian McCaffrey has been the MVP for the offense this year. He's the main catalyst behind this 8-game winning streak. Brock Purdy has done, he's definitely looked to elevate this offense as well with his play. But the winning streak, the increase in points, yards, everything started when Christian McCaffrey was ascended into the starting lineup in I believe week 8 against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, just talking statistically, McCaffrey provides you two different elements that the 49ers haven't had. He provides you a weapon in the passing game as a back, but he also provides you the ability to run both inside and outside with his skill set, his elusive skill set, where he's physical enough to take the hits inside the tackles, but also elusive enough where he can get to the outside with the speed and make plays there. And so that provides you multiple dimensions. That's why I was super excited when the McCaffrey trade went down. That's why I thought it was actually a slam dunk, despite the capital, not only for the capital reasons, but also because guess what? You now have two running backs in your offense, Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, who have the inside and outside capability. That wasn't something the 49ers had all year, which was why before that time, the 49ers, after Trey Lance went down, were rushing for just 3.8 yards per carry. And apart from chunk plays, were really struggling in inefficiency in the run game. They were 26th in DVOA, 29th in yards per carry, and certain metrics like that. They were really low. And so you needed that spark. You needed more versatility in your offense because it was too one dimensional. And that's why teams stacked the box 26% of the time when Jeff Wilson was there, because they said, guess what? You're running inside the tackles. We know that because Wilson didn't have the speed to the outside. So we're just going to stack it and force you to grit it out. And so that really caused some offensive inefficiencies to start. When McCaffrey comes, so you see the offense automatically change. You see the outside, you see the inside. And it was really good in that one game when we had Elijah Mitchell before his injury. Mitchell was running very efficiently. McCaffrey was running efficiently. And unfortunately, Mitchell went down with another MCL sprain, expected back for the playoffs. But you saw the glimpse of what the 49ers offense could be, and you still see it with Jordan Mason. Now, talking on the film specifically about the receiving part, because I thought McCaffrey's biggest asset was his ability in the receiving game, even more than him as a rusher. McCaffrey moves defenders and he creates favorable matchups. Why? Because now you have 5 guys on the field that are going to be attached to a certain defender. You're not going to teams normally play cover 2, cover 3, maybe cover 1, but they normally have an overhang safety, which means at least one linebacker is going to be on one of those 5 guys, be it on George Kittle, the tight end, or a safety on George Kittle, or be it on Christian McCaffrey. And so with the route combinations, like you mentioned, the high, medium, low that Kyle Shanahan likes to run, it creates diversions. It creates favorable matchups. And so it makes it super easy for the quarterback because you understand pre-snap and post-snap which player to identify in the route concept to hit and where you can get the best outcome of a play. That's why the offense has seen more success, because of the attention McCaffrey demands and because it makes it easier for a quarterback to really read the play. That's why you saw Garoppolo go through his progressions on a more consistent basis, why the turnover rate decreased, why the touchdown rate increased, why his efficiency increased, and why the 49ers started that 8-game winning streak, and why also Purdy was able to replicate the success and potentially even elevate that level of success when he came on the field. That's the impact Christian McCaffrey has had. That's why he's my offensive MVP.
I love that breakdown. I love how you just broke that down. I think that this is why we need to have you on the show more, man, because that was just really thorough. I like that. I like that a lot. And the point about hitting your second, third, fourth read, I think that's kind of leading to my next idea, where the offensive line has been, for the most part, fantastic this year. And we didn't expect that because the 3 interior positions were very much in flux going into the season. And when you lost a stalwart like Laken Tomlinson, who was just a fantastic player, made his first Pro Bowl last year, and you replace him with Aaron Banks, who was an unknown, you had Jake Brendel, who was an unknown, and now you had the rotation at right guard with Spencer Burford and Daniel Brunskill, or the platooning there. We didn't know what we would get out of them. And Mike McGlinchey coming back from injury. It's just there were so many unknowns along the offensive line, and we didn't know how they would perform. And that was kind of like the main cog in this offense and getting it to go. And for the most part, they've held up well. And you regularly see both Garoppolo and Purdy be able to get to the third or fourth read. And for them to be able to do that is huge, because a lot of the times that is the read that's open. And that is the read that is the matchup, right? And they're able to hit that. And I think that that's been one of the biggest changes this year, is that the offensive line has been so much better.
No, definitely. I think that's fair, and I think that that's important. Backtracking all the way to training camp, I remember there was a disparity between some of the media members and some fans. Media, myself included, who watched training camp, understood this offensive line might go through some ups and downs, but this offensive line is going to be way better than what fans expected. Fans thought, no Laken Tomlinson, no Alex Mack, you lose two potential Pro Bowlers, and you might be down. And I'm not saying that Spencer Burford, Aaron Banks, and Jake Brendel all had elite training camps by any means, but there was enough shown that you had significant optimism about each player that they could replicate, not necessarily replicate, but at least mimic some of the success that the former guys had while being better in certain areas as well. Tomlinson's number one thing as an offensive lineman was availability. I thought he was. I mean, anyone looks better when they're next to Trent Williams. So that was a thing. It was clear the 49ers weren't going to bring him back at that price range. Max retirement obviously brings in Jake Brendel into the fold. And it's important to understand that they also went through the adversity. Brendel had never snapped to Jimmy Garoppolo before week 3. And now you see that the sides are clicking. You still have the rotation at right guard. But overall, this team has done well. And it's done well in the phase that many didn't expect. Pass protection. It's been better in pass protection potentially than run blocking. The 49ers have been one of the better pass protecting teams in the NFL. I think they're a top 15 offensive line, potentially fringe top 10 offensive line this year for sure. And I think that pass protection has been a huge part. A lot of people like to pick on players like Mike McGlinchey, but when you really delve into the film, you understand McGlinchey hasn't necessarily been bad, especially as of late. He's had a couple of straight good games. It's just he falters in key moments. He had 2 false start penalties in this game in the red zone. He falters in key moments, and that brings the confidence is a big thing, and that really alters a fan's perspective of a player like Mike McGlinchey. But overall, the 49ers offensive line has done their job. One thing I will say, it's clear, though, in the running game where they prefer. They like to run it to the left side. They experience much more success when running to the left side. Obviously, Trent Williams is there, but they like the matchup that they have with the left side, be it with Aaron Banks there or be it with the pulling guard. It's clear they favor that side as opposed to the right side, which is interesting given Mike McGlinchey's reputation as a pretty solid run blocker.
Yeah, and I think that might be just more of a reflection of the fact that Trent Williams is a first ballot Hall of Fame left tackle more than anything, right? The fact that he's just a road grader over there. But I think that those are all really valid points, and I'm glad that you brought up the fact that you saw this during training camp. And I think that like what happens is that when we get to cover camp and things like that, there's things that we see that the general public may not. And when we put content out that's based off of those observations, people may be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But then there's things that the seeds are planted at that time. And there's a lot of stuff that kind of comes to fruition as the season goes on. So I'm glad that this is something that we've been able to kind of bring to the people and say, hey, like this was actually kind of in the works. This was something that we knew was gonna happen. So now that being said, I think going back to last year's championship game, against the Rams, I believe the last 7 plays, Jimmy Garoppolo was pressured heavily on all of them, including the interception that essentially sealed the game. So, and while a lot of that is on him as well to get rid of the ball and to be able to find open receivers, when you're giving up that much pressure at the end of a game, it happened in the Super Bowl as well, where the offensive line failed at the worst time against the Chiefs. I don't see that happening this year for a couple of reasons, just because I feel like Kyle has learned. And Purdy is much more mobile. He's able to get away from pressure. He's not just going to be a statue in the pocket. I think that Jimmy lost a lot of that mobility after the ACL injury, and he was not the same player. So I think that, as we kind of wrap up the offensive side of the ball, what they wanted out of potentially like Mac Jones when they were looking at him, and what they wanted out of Trey and what they wanted out of Jimmy is a lot of what Purdy is doing now, making smart decisions, getting rid of the ball quickly, being decisive with the ball, and keeping it away from trouble. And all of those things, we haven't had that here since Kyle's been coach, right? So it's refreshing
Exactly.
to see. I say every game that I'm waiting that Jimmy starts. I'm waiting for the oh no Jimmy play where
Mhm.
he throws it to a defender and it may or may not be caught. Every game he had one of those plays. You just don't see that with Brock Purdy, and I think that he's wise beyond his years, and it's super impressive. And it's the offense as a whole has been a very pleasant surprise. So I'm hoping that continues going forward and everybody stays healthy. I will say that the number one goal right now should be to keep Brock Purdy healthy, because if Brock Purdy goes down, the season is over. You don't
You don't
have
trust John Johnson? You don't trust Josh Johnson? Come on, man.
35-year-old Josh Johnson who hasn't started the game in I don't know how many
Ugh.
years, man. I can't. Like it's over at that point. So they have to keep him healthy. I think that the game plan for the next couple of games going into the playoffs will be, I don't think that Kyle will rest his guys because they have a shot at the 2 seed, but
Right.
I think the game plan will be just get the ball out of Brock's hands. He will don't let him take any hits. Get the ball out of his hands, guys. Get open and a lot of run after the catch.
Mhm. No, I expect a run dominant kind of performance against the Raiders, especially without Chandler Jones and Denzel Perryman, their leading tackler at middle linebacker. I do expect more of a run heavy approach against them, especially with the way that their team is playing thus far.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think that the one thing that I will say here is that it's nice to know that they can throw the ball 37 times and still win like they did against
Right.
Miami, and that was Brock Purdy's first. That was his first real extended action, right? And I think that that's a huge confidence booster to know that they can do that. And you're going up against a shell of a Raiders team right now, right? And we'll get into that in a second. But I do want to give my flowers to the defense as well. Another fantastic performance, as Brian Rennick says, the NC-17 defense. They gave up 20 points, but a lot of that yardage happened in garbage time. The last touchdown happened in garbage time. So NC-17, as we've come to know, no chance you're scoring more than 17. So I think that this is one of the small concerns that Kyle kind of shared this week in his presser, was that the back end of the secondary gave up a couple of big plays especially when Mooney went out, and they were susceptible to that, the third and long plays as well. So those two areas, I feel like they were struggling a little bit against Taylor Heineke and subsequently Carson Wentz. And I feel like that's kind of an area that they can improve on. What areas do you feel like the defense can improve on?
Yeah, no, I think that that's a main area, specifically in this past game. The one difference between this game and previous games with the 49ers defense, their safeties had been, their secondary had been doing a good job in eliminating explosives. That's the reason that they signed Charvarius Ward, so they could play more man defense, play more cover two shells, play more where they could limit the explosive plays in front of them, keep the ball in front of them, force these shorter gains, and then allow their defensive line to attack on second or third down, which forces a third and long or a punt or something like that. I think an area that this team could improve is that, and that's why one of my areas of concern that I put for the playoffs in my article this past week was Charvarius Ward and his health. There's been 3 or 4 instances this year where Ward has exited the game for a series of snaps. He's never missed a game, but he's exited the game for a series of snaps, and it's clear what the directive is when Ward is out. Throw exactly to whoever replaces Ward. The Washington Commanders did that this game. Samuel Womack came in, and what do? They threw 61-yard pass to from Taylor Heineke to Terry McLaurin. Now, was that Womack's fault? No. Deshaun Gibson, the overhang safety, rotated to Talanoa Hufanga when he should have remained in a spot and helped on the overhead. But you've got to understand, when Ward goes out, it's not just the play of Ward that leaves. It's the communication that Ward brings. It's the trust that his own teammates have in him. And so that also leaves, and that can lead to these communication miscues. And remember, in the playoffs, it's only one of these plays, 2 of these plays that really matter. If they get a 60-yard explosive play, they got a touchdown. That's 7 points. You might not be able to get those 7 points back later on. So it's important things like this where the communication is important and things like that, which is why I think it's imperative that Charvarius Ward remains healthy for the remainder of the year, not only in between games, but during games, because the 49ers defense is different without him, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and one of the reasons why I feel like he does get nicked up a little bit is because he's not afraid to stick his nose in there and make a tackle.
Yeah.
He's one of the best tackling corners in the league. And
Definitely.
I think that that's one of the things that is special about him, but also one of the things that also hurts him a little bit literally hurts him a little bit because he's not shying away from contact. So, I do want to point out that the last touchdown that Washington got, it was after the Dre Greenlaw should have that almost pick.
Yeah.
It should have been a pick and should have been a pick six because they blew the play dead. And Kyle tried to challenge it. He couldn't because you can't challenge an incompletion from the other team. So again, it's just a case of the officials being the officials. But I think that was a big turnover because that let Washington stay in the game. Whereas if Dre picks that and takes that the other way, the game is essentially over. So it's a little bit, the score was a little bit misleading. I feel like they put up a really good performance against a team that's potentially going to be in the playoffs. And it's what else can you say? Nick Bosa, I feel like Nick Bosa has, in my opinion, has taken the pole position for Defensive Player of the Year. He has taken that from Micah Parsons. He has been fantastic. He is approaching the team record for sacks set by Aldon Smith. He is approaching the NFL record for sacks if he can get 5.5 in the last 2 games, which is a stretch. But he has been fantastic this year. His best year as a pro, and he has just been lights out. He's the defensive MVP. You could argue that he is the team MVP as well.
No, definitely. It's funny because I look at the pressure charts and I count the pressures myself every game, and it's just like you just think 5 pressures a game is just normal for a guy like Nick Bosa, which is insane. He got 8 pressures this past game. Want to give a shout out to 4 defenders specifically. Bosa, obviously, the 2 sack, 8 pressure game led the team, but other guys like Arik Armstead does a phenomenal job. Sometimes doesn't even show up on the pressure sheet because obviously he takes 2 defenders and it leaves one open to go after the quarterback. But this game, even with the double teams that he commanded, 7 pressures, and then Charles Omenihu had 5. This is a quiet breakout season for Charles Omenihu, who I think is his 4th or 5th game this year with 5 pressures. He's just been very vital. But he's top 10 in the NFL in pass rush win rate this year. That's how impressive he's been, and that only improved. He had a 30% pass rush win rate. His season ranking is 21.9%. So he's been phenomenal for the 49ers. You've got not one, but 3 different pass rushers that can impact the game on top of the depth. We saw Jordan Willis make plays. We've seen guys like Drake Jackson, Kevin Givens, Kerry Hyder. We can name players that make plays. There have been games where all 9 defensive linemen for the 49ers have got a pressure. But those guys have been phenomenal. The last guy I want to give a shout out to, Fred Warner. 8 run stops in a single game, 12 tackles in the running game, 8 stops in a single game. Normally that's Dre Greenlaw. This time though, Warner stuck his nose in there, did a phenomenal job in the run game against one of the better run offenses as of late in the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, and to that point about Fred Warner, so the goal line stand at the beginning of the game. So that play, there's one guy that you didn't mention actually that I do want to give a shout out to as well, Javon Kinlaw. And on that play, Javon Kinlaw actually took a couple of defenders and opened up a gap for Fred Warner to be able to get that run stop. And I think that now with Kinlaw getting more reps and actually getting back in there, you have a true run stuffing defensive tackle or a guy that can occupy space to let these linebackers roam around a little bit. And the fact that the 49ers can roll out 2 separate defensive lines that have, like you said, legitimate pass rush threats is such a huge advantage because you're not just relying on Nick Bosa on your first unit there. You can rotate guys in and you're still getting ridiculous pressure rates. So again, I've been saying this all season, and I'm sad that these are the last few games that we're going to see D'Amico Ryans coach this defense. But it's been an absolute awesome. It's been an awesome ride. It's been awesome to see how they flourished under him.
Yeah, no. Let's hope. Let's hope D'Amico stays one more year. Doubt it's happening. We can only hope. But he's earned his way to probably a head coaching job of his choice. He's one of the top coordinators out there. Great. Yeah. I mean, going from Saleh to Ryans, it's been a nice couple of years for 49ers fans with their defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fantastic. And I think that the job that, not only that they've been able to do, but John Lynch, Adam Peters, that they've been able to, and Martin Mayhew before he left, they have done a fantastic job of drafting players, developing them, free agent signings. Like Deshaun Gibson was signed off the street. He's signed
with 2 weeks left to start the year. Yeah,
exactly. Right. And he's been fantastic. And people forget that that same number 2 defense that Jimmy carved up in 2017, that famous Jacksonville defense that they had with Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell and all those guys. Deshaun Gibson was the safety. He was the safety on that defense, and he was fantastic that year. So I feel like, Jimmy Ward has settled into his role in his slot as well now. And he famously said that
He's
he
been
doesn't like playing
great.
the
Yeah.
slot. He's been fantastic in the slot. We thought that there would be a big drop off after K'Wan Williams left. And it's just the next man up mentality for this defense. And they are the best defense in the league, in my opinion. This is the best 49ers defense that I have seen ever in my time of watching the team. And this is a championship level defense. And it is a defense that nobody wants to play in the playoffs. So, and it is a defense that the Raiders and Derek Carr ended up basically tapping out against. Derek Carr, for if you've been living under a rock, Derek Carr is not going to be playing this weekend. He will be sitting out the last 2 games of the season. So Jarrett Stidham is going to be the quarterback for the Raiders.
Yeah.
First career start. He is in for an absolute ride because this 49ers team still has a lot to play for. They're not sitting. They can still get that number 2 seed. So what are your thoughts on this potential matchup here?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little excitement maybe going into the year, New Year's Day, Allegiant Stadium. That obviously Vegas, one of the bigger brand name teams, but that excitement has died down a little bit. Denzel Perryman, like I said earlier, their leading tackler, a Pro Bowler last year, out. On top of that, Chandler Jones out, and so those two guys, two of their better defenders, are out. Derek Carr obviously out, meaning Jarrett Stidham will play. A move where Las Vegas is clearly thinking about their future. I wonder if there's any other moves that we see sometime soon. But a lot of defenders out. A lot of players out for the Raiders. And this is a 49ers team that could be getting a little healthier going forward. Deebo Samuel, like we said, returned to practice earlier today. Don't expect him to play this week, maybe next week, depending obviously on the playoff seeding. But seems like a favorable matchup for the 49ers. The odds makers clearly reflect that as well. The line jumped 3 points. 49ers favored by 9 points in this New Year's Eve day or New Year's Day game.
Would you take the over on that?
Ooh, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
I probably would if we being honest, but
Yeah.
that'd be interesting. 9 points. I probably would though.
Yeah, I think that the challenge last week that they had with the Commanders is that the Commanders were number 1 in the league in time of possession. So we knew that it would be a shortened game and that the offense would have limited opportunities. I think that this week, Josh Jacobs is really the biggest threat for them. Devontae Adams obviously is there, but there's nothing that says that Stidham can actually get him the ball. So I feel like it's going to be a very run heavy sort of game plan from the Raiders standpoint. And the Niners are the number 1 run defense in the league, so it's playing to their strength. And on top of that is I can't recall, is Givens playing this week? I believe he was practicing. Is he going to play this week or no?
He'll probably end up with a questionable designation. I don't know if he'll end up playing either, but regardless, it seems like the 49ers somehow, this run defense is something else. Like we face every single week, there's some challenge that they face. And Josh Jacobs has had a phenomenal year, a Pro Bowl level year. But 49ers, every time they face some team, regardless of who's playing, they're able to shut down the run. It's a testament to D'Amico Ryans and his ability to create a game plan that just has his players fitting gaps well, and also the players itself for stepping up. Because you got guys like T.Y. McGill, you've got guys like Akeem Spence playing snaps in some of these games, and the 49ers being able to shut down the run to 2, 3, 4 yards per carry at the maximum.
Yeah, T.Y. McGill, I'm glad you mentioned his name. He's been fantastic in the run game.
Yeah.
That's been a gem for sure. And I think that he's cemented his position on this team going forward as well, because he's had a fantastic year that's totally under the radar. So, okay, this is the point of the show that we usually like to give our picks. And Brian has picked the 49ers every week this year so far. So I will do Brian's pick. I'm going to assume that he will pick the 49ers to win, right? And I'm assuming that he would pick a score of probably 28-17, because he says that this defense does not give up more than 17 points. So Brian is going to pick the 49ers. Al, who is the resident wet blanket of our group, the realist, the person that is always is there to say, hey, you guys are dreaming too hard. I think that Al would probably pick the 49ers as well. And I don't know what score he would say, but I think he would probably pick the 49ers. What about you, man? Like who do you think wins this game?
Yeah, I'll probably be more on Al's side. I think initially I gave the 49ers an 11-6 or a 12-5 record, like the day the record came out. I gotta go though with the 49ers this game, especially with the circumstances. I see them as crazy as it sounds, ending the year on a 10-game winning streak this week and next week. We'll get to next week. But I think the score prediction that I gave was 31-10. I think I don't see Las Vegas just having enough offensive firepower, really. I mean, you've got obviously Devontae Adams, but Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller have taken steps back respectively, be it via injury or play. Jarrett Stidham, obviously an unknown, a guy who has been lauded for his arm talent, but nothing else. That's the reason he's kind of flamed out in certain places. Accuracy has been a little all over the place when he's had starting opportunities, and so to me, I don't think the Vegas offense can get enough, and their defense is not good. So 31-10.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with the Niners as well, and it's kind of scary to me because I've been saying for a few weeks now that like it's hard to win 10 games in a row in the NFL. It's even harder to win 14, right? Which is what it would take for them to win a Super Bowl. But you could argue that the playoffs is a reset, so that's like a new winning streak, and that's a new whole new season, right? But I'm with you. I could see them winning both of these last two games, unless Minnesota's already wrapped up the 2 seed in the last week, and at that point, you're playing Josh Johnson at that point, and it doesn't matter, and you're just sitting all your starters. But they can still catch Minnesota. So Minnesota is playing against Green Bay and Chicago in the last two games of the season. I can't remember which one of those is which, if it's flip-flop.
I think, Green Bay is this week, Chicago next week, yeah.
And that's in Green Bay as well. So, and Green Bay is still fighting for the playoffs. So that's going to be an interesting game. If Minnesota loses and the Niners can win, they'll overtake them, obviously, as the number 2 seed. And then at the end of the year, if the Niners can win that game against the Cardinals, basically they end up as the number 2 seed, which is huge. But I think that they win this week. I think it's going to be a 28-13 game. Jarrett Stidham is going to be under fire all day, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of game plan Josh McDaniels comes. He's a good offense coordinator, terrible head coach. That's really what he is, and it'll be interesting to see what he does against this defense, because it's really hard to operate an offense if you are going up against an elite pass rush. So I'm going to say the Niners win, and I'm going to say that Brock Purdy has another decent game. He may or may not throw a pick, but I feel like it'll be another building block game for him as we kind of go towards the playoffs here. And I'm going to say that the Vikings lose too. Damn it. I'm going to say that the Niners.
Okay.
I'm going to say the Niners take the number 2 seed this weekend. The Vikings are going to lose. The Niners are going to win. And then we'll be good set going into the last week of the season.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dream for 49ers fans, for obviously the win and the loss. Like you said, I think they're going to, I don't think they rest their starters. I don't think there's that scenario, because I expect the 49ers to win. And if they win, they've got a chance still at the 2 seed. Obviously, it would require some magic with the Vikings, but I expect them to win this week, like we said. And then either it's going to be week 17 where that potential playoff implication matters, or week 18, if depending on how the Vikings do. The 1 seed is somehow still in play. Jalen Hurts, I think, I don't know if he'll return this week. I think he won't practice, is what I heard earlier today, but he could return in week 18. If they lose their last 2, the 49ers win out. The 49ers make the playoffs, albeit the Eagles are playing the Saints this week. We'll see how that goes. A lot of playoff implication stuff.
Wouldn't that be something? The Niners end up with the number 1 seed, somehow end up with the number 1 seed after the way the season has gone. So, it's exciting times, and it's fun. It's really fun to see them win like this, and it's fun to cover them. And it's fun to create content on a winning team, because for so many years, at least for myself, they were losing, and you had to create content and find things to talk about for a terrible team. And it's nice to see them for the 3rd year under Kyle Shanahan make the playoffs and hopefully go into a deep playoff run. So, as we got to get out of here, Rohan, why don't you tell people where to find you on Twitter and where to find the podcast?
Yeah, so for those of you guys that can see my name on the screen, search that up on Twitter or on YouTube. That's where you'll find my Twitter account and my podcast, Rohan Chakravarthi. And then obviously you guys can find my work at 49ers Webzone. I'll write articles there, pieces on the week, pieces on certain players, all sorts of different things. But once again, Zain, got to appreciate you for having me on the No Huddle podcast. It's been a blast, and definitely enjoyed chopping it up with you.
Thank you, man. Thank you for coming on. And hey, come back anytime you want, okay? Well, let's do this again.
Yeah, no, definitely.
All right. So for Rohan, this is Zain with another episode of the 49ers Webzone No Huddle podcast, presented on the Odyssey Network. Peace.